ladies and gentlemen, my name's Scyushi, and today I wanted to do a review of the Nintendo Switch 2. I've clocked in a pretty decent amount of time with Mario Kart and a couple other games that I'm experimenting with. And I most of all wanted to have this as a video, not necessarily to sell you on the system, but to kind of answer some common questions that I've seen in regards to it online. So first, the most obvious is that this is just straight up what the community has been asking for years. This is essentially the Switch Pro that we've always wanted. It does everything the Switch 1 did and more. But more importantly, it's much more powerful. Pokemon Scarlet doesn't run like crap, and even Zelda Breath of the Wild will run at 60 frames without even getting the Switch 2 upgrade. Tears of the Kingdom, on the other hand, is locked at like 24 frames or something, so unfortunately you do have to buy the upgrade. But the fact is, there's a lot of games that have free upgrades, and then some games Nintendo is charging money for. A lot of people are blowing this out of proportion, acting like it's such a big deal when the PS5 has already been doing it for years. You end up buying a PS5 upgrade for a game at any point in time, then you can't complain about the Switch 2 upgrade. What a lot of people don't seem to realize with this thing is that a lot of these games were not designed to be at 60 frames, so that's why Nintendo can kind of justify it being a purchase. It's the same reason why I bought the PS5 upgrade to Ghost of Tsushima, because the PS4 version ran like crap. But let's talk about the system itself. It is a lot bigger than the original Switch, and one of the things that I absolutely love about it is the Joy-Cons themselves, because you just press this little trigger at the back here and boop, it just pops off. The magnetic Joy-Con is my favorite thing about this thing, just because look at this, not even any force involved. And it's already attached and locked back onto the system. I just think that that's so cool. If you do want to play this on the go, it of course does have the back stand, which to my surprise is actually just fully adjustable. It'll stay in whatever position you want. But as great as the console is, and the idea of backwards compatibility is awesome, unfortunately, not every game is backwards compatible. There are certain games that haven't gotten a Switch 2 upgrade, and you can still play them on the Switch 2 without issue, and they should have better performance, but the actual screen itself will kind of almost be like stretched, and so it can look a lot uglier than it was on the Switch 1 because the resolution was much lower on the Switch 1. Another huge thing that people are complaining about with this system is the game cartridges, not realizing that they are not nearly as bad as you would think. So the main thing people are complaining about is that the game cartridge itself in most cases will just be a sort of digital license that allows you to access the game. In a lot of cases, you can put that cartridge in your Switch and then it will give you a prompt to download the game. Lots of people are wondering, why would you end up buying that then? Because it means in the future, say the store ends up going offline at some point, then you basically just have a little disc that doesn't do anything. But the thing is, this is nothing new to the gaming industry. Everyone's acting like it's a big deal, but this has been around since the old days. I still remember buying an Xbox One game that you would pop into the system and immediately have to get a day one patch in order to even play the game. But on top of that, any first-party Nintendo games are going to have the entire game on the cartridge. They are simply giving third-party developers the option of having this be a key that gives you a digital download to the game. So don't get mad at Nintendo because they're just trying to give better third-party support to the developers, and it's up to them whether or not they try to squeeze it on the cartridge or not. In particular, Cyberpunk is entirely on the cartridge. But then a game like Bravely Default is a digital download because those devs are cooked. I have ran into a couple games on here that unfortunately just straight up aren't backwards compatible. Like there's this online game Trove that doesn't run on the Switch 2 and unfortunately means that a developer has to reach out and fix it for the Switch 2. I'm just saying that there is a possibility that this will happen with a couple other games. And unfortunately, another thing that I've discovered is that the mouse control with the Joy-Con, while it works on the main menu, like you basically just put the Joy-Con sideways and the Switch will immediately recognize, oh, you're trying to use mouse control. That's actually awesome, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work in game. One of my big worries with the mouse control was that it was something that developers then had to code into their games versus something being natively on the Switch, because it means that it potentially is just a gimmick that'll fall to the wayside. You can just use a normal USB mouse on the system as well. Okay, cool. But I'm still waiting for people to 3D print like some sort of attachment to the Joy-Con so you can use it sideways without giving yourself carpal tunnel. Another thing a lot of people might be interested to know is the battery life on the system, which so far is great. The controllers themselves I've been able to use for multiple days without them charging. And one of my favorite features that you can get at in the accessibility options is to tell the Switch to only charge to 90% rather than the full 100, which will ultimately save you more battery life in the long run. So for a lot of people, I think it's going to be a done deal to just exchange your Switch 1 for the Switch 2. Well, rather than exchange it, sell it on the marketplace. If you try to exchange it at the store, they're gonna give you like $50 store credit to this thing. I was able to sell my Switch 1 for like $300 when the Switch 2 was announced because I knew this was gonna be a straight upgrade. I don't need my Switch 1 anymore. But okay, what about the game price? What about the game upgrade cost? That is kind of up to the developer. Zelda, for example, is a $15 upgrade for either Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. Why wouldn't I just get the Tears of the Kingdom upgrade? It's a better game. But then a game like Fantasy Life, for example, is like $3 to upgrade. The argument could be said that if you're playing Fantasy Life on the PS5 or just on PC, then you don't need the upgrade, so you're saving yourself $3, woohoo. But a game like that actually has cross save, so you could actually just play it on PC and then you could swap to the Switch and play it on the go. That's kind of the big advantage of the Switch 2, is again, it is a portable console. As a new dad, it's fantastic for me because I can sit and play it on the couch while I'm taking care of the baby. But the biggest controversy online is the price of the games, in which case, I'm sorry to say this in such a negative sense, but you just gotta grow up and face facts. Games are going to cost this much moving forward. At the very least, I appreciate that Nintendo is starting to have a varied cost to their games, Mario Kart being 110 Canadian versus Donkey Kong just being $100 because Nintendo knows, oh, the quality of each of those games is not necessarily the same. The only reason I'm pointing this out is because everyone else in the industry is slowly going to end up increasing the cost of their games without taking that into consideration. A lot of you have probably already seen over the recent Xbox showcase that The Outer Wilds 2 is going to be $80. Sorry, that's The Outer Worlds 2, not The Outer Wilds, and it's actually 100 Canadian dollars. I'm not trying to poke fun at the game or anything like that, but the fact remains, this game is not worth that. But Xbox has already showed their hand. They've seen that the Switch 2 was profitable, and so they upped the price of their system for no reason, and they are following suit with upping the price of their video games. The gaming industry has always been an expensive hobby. Arguably, it's actually cheaper now than it's been in many, many years. Because I still remember paying $100 for a Nintendo 64 game, and that was before inflation. This is a whole other discussion to unpack, but my point being is the price of the video game isn't going to end up swaying my opinion towards the Switch 2 because all the other consoles are going to be doing the same. And while the initial upfront cost of the Switch 2 might seem expensive, I think that most people can agree it's pretty good to pay only like $600 or $700 for a new system that is ultimately going to end up being a 7 to 8 year lifespan. That said, I can totally understand people that want to wait for more exclusives. However, I think that the US tariff is going to ultimately affect the Switch 2's cost in the future. I don't know if that's going to end up affecting us Canadians, but this is getting off topic. I personally think that the Switch 2 console is amazing because it's exactly what we wanted, a stronger Switch.